It sounds like you guys took a GE J85 engine, which is right out of a T38. You chop the afterburner off, and then you put your own thing on the back and pump some stuff in the intake, and you're able to get that thing up to like Mach 4.
You're telling the story better than I can. That's good.
It sounds like you did it in in your barn in the back, the way.
I mean, it's obviously more difficult than.
All players, slow down. Active. Bullseye. 1327. Push active. Lights on.
Okay, we're live. Welcome everybody to another episode of The Merge, where we make sense of defense in an enjoyable way. I am joined back on the mics with Jake and Tim. And if you remember back in our first episode, we laid out this master plan to become the world's most okayest defense podcast. We're well on our way to becoming average, so that's good. But if you remember, it was all about the LIT, the Long Island iced tea. So we were going to take some ingredients, keep mixing them together, and just kind of see how it goes. And the last few episodes, we've kind of been in the weeds with some policy stuff, some research and development, some money and capital, probably a little bit of doom and gloom. You can blame me for that. We heard you. You've told us you wanted to hear a little bit more about some technology. Heard you. So today we're going to mix it up with our first ever interview, and I'm going to call the shot. This is going to be the best business interview we've ever done because it's going to be the default winner. It's our first, and through the power of editing, we're going to make it awesome. So we're going to be shooting for something that's in between Joe Rogan and between two ferns. When we thought about what we're going to talk about, what's hotter than hypersonics? And so our guest today, we are joined by AJ Piplica, the founder and CEO of Hermeus, where they're building a Mach 5 passenger jet by 2029. So what's cooler than that? Welcome, AJ. Welcome to the pod.
Thanks, guys. Very glad that we're starting the puns early here. Keep calling them out in the scene.
I love it. And just to start with a couple of icebreaker questions, which is probably a complete curveball, and then we'll kind of get into some of the things. Okay, are you ready? It's rapid fire. So first thing top of mind. Okay.
Oh, this is like, wait, don't tell me. Not my job. Let's go.
All right. Cat or dog?
Dog.
Morning person or night person?
I'm a morning person now. It's changed.
Dine in or takeout?
Dine in.
Suit or slacks?
Oh, man. Definitely neither.
Jeans. That's the best answer. Yes. Your favorite state?
Florida.
Oh, let's talk about that in a minute. And the last one, who is your favorite co-founder? Because you have multiple co-founders.
Oh, I'm going to get in trouble if I answer that one.
Spicy.
You don't have to answer that,
I'm just going to claim we actually have one founder. There's just four of us with a collective consciousness. So, yeah, I'm going to not get in trouble.
So what I love is that answer really implies that he has a favorite co-founder. He's just not willing to share it live.
No, all right. I'll give you an anecdote. Sorry, this is going to take a little longer. Somebody asked me once, what was the hire that you're most proud of? And it was one of my co-founders at my previous company, and I hired all three of them. So I didn't have to pick one. And there was one that was just significantly harder, and it just it took a lot of work and took some crafting and a lot of just personal relationship building and whatnot, which is way different than I'd ever done before, and it was the first time I did that. So decide which one it was, though. I don't know if I'm going to tell you.
So I think it's like the Voltron answer, right? Like together, like the sum of the parts kind of thing.
Oh, Voltron, good one. Yeah, most kids would have picked Power Rangers, but
I'm
Voltron.
too old for that. Voltron. I'm in the Voltron age.
Oh, there's also oh man, what's that other one where they have these little eagle beaks? Gotcha. Yeah, that's the Japanese one.
Congratulations, by the way. I think you just have your second, right? Recently.
Yeah, we did. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a journey. So you're
and it is.
Yeah. So, welcome back to the office.
I haven't taken that much time off ever. So it's taken a little while to readjust the brain to communicating with adult humans again.
Nice. Well, we're humans. I'm not sure we're qualified as adults, but we do our best impersonation every day. So when I was doing some research on you, and I tell you what, if you guys get a chance, we'll put it in the show notes. Check out two things. If you check out AJ's LinkedIn profile and you check out his company's homepage at Hermeus, it tells you everything you need to know about where he came from and where he's trying to go. And what I love about it, on your LinkedIn profile, it says, you have a quote that says, "It is better to fail aiming high than to succeed aiming low." And I love that. But what I also love, that I think you're probably one of the only CEO founders that I've seen, you actually list all of your jobs all the way back to college, which wasn't that long ago compared to some of us. But in each, not only that, but what I love is you listed like each, like the bullets of the things that you did in each of those jobs. And so you could actually map out AJ from today all the way back into your college days, and you could see the engineering pedigree, and you could just kind of map it out. I think where your passion has been, since early 20s.
I think I still have something on there where I was a skating instructor, actually. But yeah.
So AJ, before we get into Hermeus, why don't you tell me a little bit about that journey from your LinkedIn profile days and how you you did a little bit of time at NASA. Yeah. There's some X-Plane stuff somewhere in there. It seems like you're getting all the engineering pieces in place.
Yep.
Whether you knew it or not back then, to kind of be where you are today and where you're trying to go tomorrow.
Yeah, they say that your passions choose you, you don't choose them. That's definitely true. I think growing up, I kind of like two things. I like building things, and I like the future. So playing with Legos and Kinects and whatever I could get my hands on, take apart and go build something else with. And then I love sci-fi, Star Trek, Star Wars, all these futuristic things. And it's funny, like vehicles are incredibly important pieces of those universes. Like without things that fly around, there is no Star Trek and there's no Star Wars. Pair that together and like go and building the things that fly. It's pretty cool. And I think it was in middle school. I went to an air show at MacDill Air Force Base down in Tampa, and saw a C-5 Galaxy fly, and that just absolutely broke my brain. Like it made no sense to me how a building could lay on its side with some skinny little wings and get in the air. From there forward, I was like, okay, I should probably go do something down this route. I got to undergrad at Georgia Tech and realized I didn't know the first thing about what aerospace engineering actually was. Part of why I picked Georgia Tech was because like Embry-Riddle's program was aeronautical engineering, and it just like didn't seem as cool. So I don't know if that's changed or not, but so yeah, I was just like I didn't know a thing. So learned a lot there at school, and then got an opportunity to work down at NASA Johnson on a bunch of different things. Did some wing leading edge stuff for the shuttle. Got to sit on console for a couple shuttle missions, monitoring the space shuttle for micrometeoroid impacts.
How old were you when you got to do that?
20.
So you couldn't even crack open a beer when the shuttle got into orbit?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I mean, I did. But...
The statute of limitations is run. It's okay to admit it.
Yeah, I think we're past my 7 years now. We're okay. Hopefully DCSA isn't listening. Anyway, yeah, so that kind of, and then I went back and worked on computational fluid dynamics for shuttle reentry and figuring out what happens to dust on the lunar surface when you land a lander there, and that kind of got me into the aerodynamics world, and that's where I kind of really got bitten by the bug. But like I wasn't a space person, I was down at Johnson working with a lot of people who are just like massively gung ho about space, like want to be an astronaut, been wanting to work on the shuttle my whole life, whatever, and that just wasn't me. I was more of a airplane person. But the problem was all the cool stuff that was happening in university and industry like didn't seem like it was in the airplane. So I ended up being an aerodynamics person down the space track, and there's not a whole lot that an aerodynamicist can do in a vacuum other than like rocket engines and reentry. And then I learned about, after a brief stint at looking at supercavitating torpedoes, which is like going really fast underwater, hypersonics, so going really fast in the air. From there forward, that was when the bug bit me, and that passion chose me and took me forward. So, we got a chance to work at a small company for a number of years here in Atlanta, doing conceptual design for hypersonic aircraft and reusable launch vehicles, like we actually have today, which is pretty cool. And had an opportunity to basically pick up a subsidiary of the company and grow it. And that was Generation Orbit. So I decided to give it a try. It seemed like a fun thing to do. Building businesses was part of the cadre of things I was interested in building. So I figured I'll give it a try. And that was a fantastic experience. Spent, about 5 years, building that company up to about 20 people, turned a single phase 1 Cyber into about a $10-20 million development program for an X-plane, air-launched liquid rocket. Got through a bunch of ground testing, bunch of flight testing. By the time, the second half and end of 2018 rolled around. So I've made a lot of progress there. But also, like, having been exposed to the hypersonics world as it went through kind of a massive lull in funding in the kind of basically like when sequestration hit in the latter half of the 2000s, NASA like basically completely shut down its entire hypersonics program, and quite a bit went away in the Air Force as well. But what was left, I got to actually be a reasonable part of and get exposed to. So as things started to ramp up again, it became pretty clear that like it's not going away this time. Hypersonics has always had the kind of the 7-year-ish, I think it's like 17 years, where funding goes up and goes down and goes up and goes down. But having seen that historically and kind of understanding enough about kind of the geopolitical situation in the world, it seemed like it wasn't going away this time because we're a little behind. The U.S. doesn't like to be behind when it comes to advanced technology. So from there, I was like, okay, what does that mean? There's a couple hypersonic missile programs going on right now. What's next? The next thing was like aircraft. Okay? Like I like aircraft. So, like, would love to build a cool new aircraft that flies super fast. As started thinking about it more and more and digging in and whatnot, it became clear that like hypersonic aircraft are a fundamentally different beast in terms of the kind of broad ranging and positive impact they can have in the world relative to hypersonic weapons because of the commercial application. Aircraft are fundamentally dual use. Missiles are not. And that kind of changes the game. And having hired, a number of people out of SpaceX and Blue Origin and the new space world, at Generation Orbit, and 3 of them, we eventually decided to co-found Hermeus together. I kind of learned a lot by osmosis. So I never worked at SpaceX, I never worked at Blue Origin, but I learned a lot about what engineering complex systems meant and how to do it in today's day and age. And it seemed like applying that to hypersonics and hypersonic aircraft was a possible thing. And then, between the 4 of us co-founders, my background of, building and running a business, Glenn's background in propulsion and structures, Skylar's in avionics, software, GNC, everything with electrons, and Mike's with aerothermal system design, that kind of stuff. Like, we kind of had among the 4 of us all the little pieces of disciplines that are necessary to go try and do something.
I'll point out real quick that I think 5 of the last 10 words you said, I don't even know what those mean. So...
I thought this was an acronym safe zone.
No, the actual words.
It was great. I was going to thank him later to help me learn about supercavitating.
That's a great word.
I can't remember which pod it was. One of the it might have been the one with you guys that Eric Lofgren did, but learning about Monospony, that was a new word.
Yep.
Yeah. I can't wait. I cannot wait. I put this on Twitter. Nobody liked it because it was not popular enough. I can't wait till somebody makes the game.
Defense
like, call up
Acquisitions, the board game?
and say, please, go make that.
It's not right. It's not right.
Yeah, put it on Product Hunt.
Did you get one request?
Go to contracting jail.
Yeah, who's not going to get PTSD after playing that game? My goodness. Yeah, so, we realized that, like, also a lot of people were raising money at the time. So this is, 2018. People were raising money to put against really hard aerospace problems, and specifically even in high-speed flight. And we kind of thought they were doing it wrong, and that there was a better approach to actually get to the end of the runway. Again, no pun intended. And that's kind of what drove us to start the company when we did. Having the technical capabilities, realizing the technology was mature enough. Clearly, there was a national security application in the near term that you could do with autonomous aircraft where you put a person on it, and there's capital available. Okay, not only do we want to do this, we have a responsibility to do this. Like, this group of people at this point in time, if we don't do this, we're going to be kicking ourselves, and it's going to be bad.
So who's doing it wrong?
Well, so specifically, I was talking about like Arion, and Boom. So Arion, I think, like, they're not around anymore, so that's there. But like, they've been around for, 13, 14 years, and the only hardware that the company had built was a wind tunnel. And that just, like, if you're going to develop a new aircraft, like, you should probably be building some hardware in that time. And then on the kind of supersonic commercial side with Boom, it just seemed like the financial path to getting where you need to go, raising $8 billion private capital before you get to a penny of revenue, and you have to go through FAA certification. It just seems like an untenable path, and there really aren't intermediate markets for commercial supersonic aircraft. So Yeah, I mean that's more what I mean when I say we thought.
So-
I guess you could ask the question too: is a supersonic aircraft or supersonic passenger experience, is that a 10x better experience for a passenger, or is maybe a hypersonic passenger experience is 10x better? I don't know.
Yeah, we got to build it and find out.
So I'm glad you actually mentioned like the approach. So 2 questions before we get to the 2018, like the founding of the company. Hermeus, who came up with the name, and what were you pulling on?
Okay, so I probably have to give the most credit to Skylar. I don't remember exactly how it came up. There were definitely a bunch of other names that it could have been that I'm glad that it wasn't. I think we had hyperspace in there at some point. So yeah, glad we
Yeah,
didn't.
you
do
just
that.
said you don't like
Um,
space. That would be a terrible name for a company.
Yeah, like the thing doesn't go to space, so why do we name it that? I just thought hyperspace is fast. So, anyway, so the name came from Hermes, which is the Greek god of trade and commerce. We tend to not mention that he's also the god of like ferrying people between the land of the living and the dead on boats. So that's not like a great mantra for a company building airplanes. So we just leave that aside and talk about trade and commerce. But we like didn't want to get confused with the French scarf company, let alone like get sued. Even though Hermès is somebody's name and has nothing to do with Hermes. We knew pretty early like we should probably tweak it a little bit. So we added the US at the end for a couple reasons, but the primary one is really like we wanted to focus on people. Like we are building a product at the end of the day that is going to change the lives of a massive number of people. And like that is where our focus lives. And then internally, we wanted to build a culture at the company that really focused and cared on its people, about its people. And I think that's something that's maybe a little bit different than other new space companies out there. And we just wanted to make sure that was like front and center in our minds. So, and then of course, like, yeah, we're a U.S. company working on national security stuff. That wasn't part of the original thing. It just kind of came out later.
No, that's great. And you mentioned in your previous company having worked in the cyber. So Tim is our cyber expert. So if I go back in 2018, I was looking at Crunchbase actually and trying to figure some your funding profile out. Just there's obviously a story behind that. And so you started. It sounded like initially with private money, then you got into the cyber program with the Air Force in 2020 to phase 2, and then last year you just got a $60 million StratFi increase from AFWorks. Is that right?
I think it was in 2021.
Oh, sorry, it's 23 now. Jesus,
yeah.
Yeah. There's no excuse. We're already in February. Yeah, that shouldn't happen anymore. So yeah, 2021. Sorry. And then now you pivoted from that into, or pivot, you grew into, maybe is a better word, into some venture backed money. So you're just raised a Series B recently. Is that right?
Yep, almost a year ago.
Okay. And the key investors I thought were pretty interesting. So I want to say was it $100 million round? Is that right? Okay, so $100 million about a year ago. Yep. It's a Series B, and the people who there was a bunch of people, but some of the people that stand out was Raytheon Ventures, InQtel, which is kind of famous for being the backing some of the tech that goes to the CIA, Founders Fund, which is pretty famous, and then Tim's man crush of the year so far, Sam Altman. From OpenAI or ChatGPT. He is the man behind that. So
I must say, pause. I love the rap song. That was incredible.
Thanks.
That was
Love it.
Yeah. I need to reach out to Sam and give him one of these premium accounts so we can keep messing with it and having some fun with it.
We should be sponsored by ChatGPT at this point. I mean, they do the intro, they do the outro. We got the rap song.
Oh man.
Oh, all right. Can I share a ChatGPT experience?
Yeah, please.
Please.
Just to make sure you guys stay on brand and put in shameless plug. Well, this one's kind of the opposite of a plug. It's funny though. So I had a little bit of a hot take on Twitter that, of course, drove up some controversy, and there are a lot of texts started flapping around after I put it out. But I said something like, defense contractors should make whatever profits they want, or market profits in peacetime, and no profit at war. We can talk more about that if you all want to. But anyway, some of the comments that came.
It's in my notes. Ask about it.
Oh, there it is.
Jake,
right.
It's usually Jake that has the spicy take, but AJ is our guest with his own spicy take today. Wow, this is great.
Yeah.
So anyway, somebody had commented about like the like incentives and motivations in Congress and how that kind of plays out, and so I wanted to do a little research on like, hey, what's happened in the past? Or is there any correlation between election or like re-election outcomes of incumbents and wars that are going on? So normally I would just search on Google, but I was like, oh, I'll play with ChatGPT, see what happens. So, I typed in some stuff and eventually it like recommended some papers. And I was like, oh, cool. Can you send me some links? No, I'm not allowed to do that. Like, okay, fine. So I just grabbed, like, highlighted the name of the paper in quotes because it's like paper. I put it in Google. Nothing shows up. It's like, that's weird. So I go to the next one, like, do the same thing. Nothing shows up. I did it with all 4. None of them showed up. So I wrote it back. I was like, are these fiction? And it's like, no, these are absolutely correct. They come from these journals, blah, 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 blah. And then I was like, well, I can't find them on Google. And then it writes back, yeah, sorry, I made these up.
Did you? So AJ,
Wow.
AJ, I don't know. I don't know. I think we're on LinkedIn together. I did a post like a few days ago of this great conversation with ChatGPT, which is 2 + 5. What's 2 + 5? And the ChatGPT goes, no, it's 7. And the response is like, well, my wife says it's 8. And then it has this whole conversation of like, well, your wife probably like misunderstood the question. It's like, no, she's never wrong. It's 8. And then ChatGPT is like, well, my information is only as current as 2021, so the answer is 8. like no.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Yep. It is very
so
good at
cool.
making things up. I'll put it that way.
Well,
ChatGPT should get a contract from the DoD for like tactical questioning training, right? You could train those guys how to break the AI. If you can break an AI,
it's like a bounty.
You can
it's
break
a
a
bounty
terrorist.
hunt, right?
Prompt
Instead of like a bug
engineering,
bounty, you go, hey, go break our natural language neural network.
Well, did you Nick Shalon, right? The chief software officer or the previous chief software officer for the Air Force. He actually is building a model for that, and I think they're trying to ingest like go no go decisions for pilots, right? In terms of like weather or risk management. But then there's also a piece about contracting and stuff. I mean, it's still in its early stages, but it's should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely
it work
definitely has promise. The fact that everyone is curious, and playing with it is, I think that's a pretty good market indicator right there. Like, hey, there's something there. It'll grow into what it needs to be. So, speaking of growing, get back to Hermeus. And so we talked about you. We talked about your LinkedIn profile. If you go, the other thing I love about your kind of transparency, it is pretty clear within 1 minute on the website of where you guys are going and then what your approach is to get there. Where a lot of companies you go and it's like, here's this cool video and some some graphics and some buzzwords, and it's like, contact us for more information. Like, you guys, I think, are flip the script. Like, here's the info. Like, here's the targets we're going after. And for everyone who's for unaware, I'd say crawl to walk to run, but it's fly small and fast, fly a little bit bigger and a little bit faster, and then fly bigger, fast with people. That's kind of the stepping stones. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
all right.
It.
So the first one, we'll start with the kind of the near thing. So there's 3 vehicles. They all look a little different, and they all have different kind of engineering milestones. So the first one is called the Quarterhorse. That is powered by, I'm going to get this wrong. Is it Chimera?
Chimera.
All right. So Quarterhorse is powered by an engine technology. I call it technology. I'll get to why in a minute. Called Chimera, and that's based off of. It sounds like you guys took a GE J85 engine, which is right out of a T38. You chop the afterburner off, and then you put your own thing on the back and pump some stuff in the intake, and you're able to get that thing up to like Mach 4.
You're telling this story better than I can. That's good.
It sounds like you did it in in your barn in the back. The way
I mean, it's obviously more difficult than. If people who aren't tracking at home, they did an engine test of this probably 4 months ago, 5 months ago now.
Yeah, we released it back in November, I think.
See, it would have been, I don't know if it was like better lucky than good if you were, texting Tom Cruise or whatever. Well, first of all, if you haven't watched Top Gun Maverick, I don't know why you're listening to this. Go pause it and watch the movie because you're way behind the power curve. But let's assume you did. And the opening scene, Tom Cruise gets out there, Maverick goes and takes this plane up to hypersonic, and somewhere in the Mach 4.6.7 range, he kind of switches over the engines from kind of a turbojet and the into a ramjet, and they kind of take off, and he gets the Mach 10, and then a little bit over Mach 10 and then 0 when it disintegrates. So if you picture that, and when I saw this video, if you picture that in the movie, that's all obviously computer generated. So AJ's company did that with a real engine on a test stand. Like, and it looks exactly like that, which is, I thought, I was like, that is cool.
Yeah, we probably should do a little side by side with some footage from the film. Yeah, honestly, that's the way that I explain it to just about anybody, engineer or not. It's like, you've seen Top Gun, right? You know the part where he goes switching to scramjet? Yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
Transitioning to scramjet.
That was cool.
And we're gonna do it like soon.
So was the my big question though is
awesome.
I mean the visuals looked very, very similar. I'm like, hey, that's a pretty good job. I want to hear about the sound though. So did it sound the same like the movie? Can you make the sound?
I should definitely not be allowed to
That's
do
all right.
that.
I'm just messing with you. Did I read it right? So you're like, hey, I don't want to just go fly the Quarterhorse, and this is this year, right? You're gonna fly it this year?
Yeah, it's planned. Get out the door and up in the air by the end of the year. First one.
Nice. And
Wow.
yeah, that's impressive. So
well, you can say that when we've done it.
Yeah. Well, if it falls apart at just over the goal, then I mean that's Top Gun Maverick. I mean the parallels of this are uncanny.
We'll be sure when we hit 4 and then we'll just accidentally put the nose down and see what happens. Yeah. We'll make sure to put a little figurine that'll show up somewhere in North Dakota.
Yeah. Oh, you're gonna do it over land? Are you
gonna... we'll see. So yeah, I mean they're in the past. So like the X-15 flew over land between Edwards and Dugway. So there isn't an existing corridor, though most of that ground already has an environmental assessment that's necessary to fly over it. So there are some over water ways to do it as well. But when Quarterhorse flies fast, it can't get back to where it started. So it has to land downrange, which kind of limits how you set it up. So Darkhorse will be a little different, but Quarterhorse is really all about getting up there and getting back. So
you're building an unmanned hypersonic system that's not designed to come home and land at home base. Sounds like there's lots of applications for that. Besides,
it's designed to land. Number of takeoffs are supposed to equal number of landings. It just can't land where it's.
So we're talking about Mach numbers and high speeds, and you threw out the X-15. So again, for people who are unaware, the X-15, if I remember correctly, that is the airplane that in the air, so not space, the fastest a human has ever been. So that is a Mach 6.7 flight at 300,000 feet, and this is 60s, right? 1960s time frame, 70s.
Late 50s.
Yeah, 50s and 60s, right? When they're throwing X-planes everywhere out in the desert. So I remember reading about the story. I'm like, this is crazy. Again, this is a long time ago. So it's air launched off of like a B-52, and it's rocket powered. So there's no engine, just a rocket. There's a human strapped inside this rocket with wings, and there's two windows. And this is, again, technology at the time. They're getting up to Mach 6.7, and they couldn't keep the windows from basically burning up. And so if you burn up, like the guy can't see to land the plane. So they're like, well, how are we going to fix this? Instead of like trying to re-engineer the window, they just put a blast shield over one window. So it would launch with like the left window open and the right window had a big, a blast shield on it. And it would get up to Mach 6.7. It would basically turn the viewing window black. It was just charred. And then they would pop off the blast shield for the other window so he could actually see the ground and land.
Yeah, they did some crazy things back then. I mean, they snapped one of them in half, put it back together, and got it back in the air in a couple months.
Yeah. So that's one end of the spectrum.
Who wants to be the pilot in that plane?
Yeah, that's like that really is the right stuff era. Like back, you watch the movie like Test Pilot. It's like, oh. Yep. So that's one end. That's way out there extreme. That's Mach 6.7. If we dial it back a little bit, and you get into actual engines and aircraft with people, now you get into the SR-71 is probably the one that comes to mind for most people. Mach 3.3 was the record for the fastest jet powered aircraft and also the fastest production aircraft, if I remember right. And you're looking to break that record of the SR-71 this year, albeit it's not production, it's not manned, but it is a jet powered aircraft. It is an airplane. It is not a rocket plane. Dude, that's calling your shot.
That record is that record has stood for almost 50 years, which is kind of crazy.
If that can't get Tom Cruise to come out and watch you do it, Tom, if you're listening, hit us up. I'll connect you to AJ. We'll make it all happen.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you have any celebration plans for that, or if you're successful? Obviously don't like count the chickens before they hatch.
I'll tell you, there's
right?
going to be
like,
whiskey
say
one
things
way
go
or
well.
another, whether we hit it or whether it crashes.
You building like 2 or 3?
Yeah,
Okay.
2 or 3.
Every civilized household has to have 2 things: a bottle of champagne and a bottle of whiskey on hand for celebration and commiseration.
That's awesome. So that's the Quarterhorse. That is going to be awesome. You got to promise to come back and tell us how it went. Well, we're going to see it on the news, obviously.
Oh yeah, just go hang out in the desert. You'll hear it.
Hopefully, it doesn't break apart like Maverick.
Yeah.
What kind of altitude is that going to be up? Like 80,000 feet?
Quarterhorse will probably get up to around 80. Yeah.
That's SR-71 territory. It's like a U2, but 5 times faster.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first step in your 3-step process to win, if you will, as a company. The second one, so you're gonna go from the Quarterhorse, you're gonna learn everything on that, and you're gonna move that into what you're calling Darkhorse, and that is a larger, still unmanned thing, and that is a Mach 5 reusable. So Mach 4 was initial, so bigger and faster now. So Mach 5. And it sounds like instead of remotely piloted, you're thinking maybe autonomous and some kind of defense application, and then a different engine. I think the engineering, but scaling it up to a bigger engine, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I got to ask you, because I read that you recently selected the Pratt & Whitney F100 for the Darkhorse, the front half of that.
Mm-hmm.
Which one? Is it the 220 or the 229?
229.
Ah, there you go. Good answer. Yeah, I've flown them both, 229, hands down.
Nice. Darkhorse really starts to take on the challenges of long duration, high speed. And that's kind of the big difference between, I think, what most people think of as like hypersonic in the past. It's like rockets fly hypersonic, shuttle flew hypersonic. It just didn't do it for an extended period of time. So that's what's kind of new and hard, because temperatures aren't as high, but you're just dumping so much heat in constantly that you have to manage all that and get it off the vehicle in one way or another. So that's what makes it hard. We're skipping a lot of those challenges with Quarterhorse because it just gets up to Mach 4, comes back, but Darkhorse has to stay there. So prove out cruise, all the environmental control, thermal control, all that, and then transition it into an honest to goodness military capability, which goes much beyond just an airplane that flies fast. That's cool, but one that can see things, talk to things, let things fall off the back. That is a useful key. So that's the challenge that we have to get something like that up and running in the second half of the decade.
What kind of range or endurance are you guys thinking? Because that's like an F-16 sized aircraft, right? It's like 45 feet long.
A little bigger. It seems closer to F-15.
Okay, that's big.
Yeah, it's pretty big for an aircraft. Not quite SR-71 scale, but we're not talking publicly about range and things like that.
Okay.
But like,
fair enough.
It's less than Halcyon. So Halcyon's about 4,000 nautical miles.
So over 400 and less than 4,000. Got it. Yep. Somewhere in there.
When's the Sipper version of the podcast? We got to work on that, right?
Someone asked me that the other day. I was setting up another episode. Like, what's the classification? I'm like, what?
Distribution's really tough on the classified
podcast.
It is.
Yeah,
really tough.
So in terms of like your go-to-market strategy for the DoD, right? I mean, there's companies out there that are struggling just to like get a widget into like the hands of the warfighter, right? And what you're doing is so much more complicated and complex. I'm curious, like, what is your like acquisition strategy, right? Like you're going through cyber stuff, and like how are you like planning to go to market for the defense space, right? And actually get through the bureaucracy and navigate all that stuff.
Yeah, so I won't speak to specifics, but I'll give some kind of like general ways to look at the problem. So the general problem with kind of selling to the DoD at scale is getting through the valley of death between when a product is ready and somebody is willing to buy it, to when cash can actually enter your bank account for it, which is usually 3 years if you're lucky. So that's going through all of the service programming, everything at OSD, everything in the executive branch, the White House, and then through Congress, and then of course Congress has to pass budget, which always happens on time. and then you have to get on contract and so forth. So that's that like there's like a phasing issue, and the DoD and the government more broadly typically won't put something on contract and buy it before it's been demonstrated and ready. So like how do you do that? And I think the trick really is there's a lot more flexibility when you're working with smaller dollars. So like you're working in the tens of millions of dollars, like you can do a lot of stuff under the reprogramming threshold to make dollars move and get things going a lot faster. Congress can kind of short circuit the budgeting process by adding in marks, which is pretty late in the game. So there are ways to kind of get dollars flowing at a certain scale. But once you get to a large enough scale, you got to be in the right process. So you kind of have to time phase everything appropriately, where you have something that's close enough to being operable that can kind of get dollars moving in the tens of millions a year, and can give people enough confidence to go put something into the budget for it, and hopefully be able to bridge, between today and 2 and 3 years from now, the 1 or 2 fiscal years that will be missing funding. All doing that while you're working, the next phase of things, so that because like really when you're selling to the government, you have to be thinking of like 3 years down the road. So you have to get like basically a 3-year buffer worth of revenue sorted out at whatever scale of company you can be in that time, relative to either just the revenue coming in if you're bootstrapping, or whatever you're going to raise privately on top of that to keep growing. But you have to build that bridge, and that bridge is made of things that you can do in relatively small dollars. But so that's kind of the general way to think about it. And there's so many kind of ways to do that. I think within the existing system, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy, and you really need something that is kind of game changing and people get emotionally attached to. And that's why I think it's hard for widgets, because it's like when you're talking about, hey, we're gonna like do fly a hypersonic airplane, that gets people very excited. And having a commercial vision at the end of the day also helps quite a bit. But like, yeah, there are tons of, I think, reforms that do need to happen to make this more accessible and move faster, and then get capability out to the warfighter faster. But we have the system we have for the time being, and like we have to figure out how to hack it properly. And it's certainly possible. The folks who have been successful at doing that, from the coming out of the venture world, typically have billionaire founders. And the reason that a lot of that capital is important, because how long is it going to take you actually to get to reasonable revenue coming out of the government? And if that's like 10 years, then yeah, you have to find somebody who's just going to bankroll the company for that amount of time, or you have a commercial market. But the issue with the commercial market path is that like once you're working with the commercial market, working with the government becomes potentially significantly less attractive. But for us, working with the government is existential. Like if we're not successful at not just signing a contract, but delivering a capability and delivering it at scale, and it actually solving real problems in the field, we don't get a chance to go try and build Halcyon. So like when you frame it that way, and it's like an existential thing, you find the ways to make it work.
How important to your venture investors is the commercial path ultimately, Halcyon? Were they investing in that, or do they get the defense use case, and is that sufficient for them to be excited about Hermeus?
Yeah, so I think everybody is sufficiently excited about the defense use case to invest in the business, because I think at this stage, that's really the business that you're investing in. The commercial side on the back end is just massive upside. Like the size of that commercial market is probably 1 or 2 orders of magnitude larger than the defense market, but you don't have a chance of getting to it unless you go through this way. So it really underwrites the risk of that kind of big swing. So it's the kind of same thing. Like if Elon went and tried to raise money just to go to Mars, he'd probably get some, but he's not going to get the 10 billion that's actually needed to get there. But with every piece of technology that they had to develop to get a chance to go try at that, all of those things, Falcon 1, Falcon 9, Dragon, Starship, Starlink, those are all solving really important problems for customers and bringing in significant revenues to the company that allow it to have, continue to have good access to capital and grow into what they want to do long term. So like you can align your strategic roadmap as a company with what your customers need, and the steps that you have along the way to de-risk the tech are actually productizable, you can cross the valley.
So what's your head count right now?
We're around 100.
Okay, that's good. So growing rapidly, based on I think success this year.
Doubled last year. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it sounds like at some point, as you grow into headcount and basically into the market, so your contracts get larger, like you said, as you transition from the shortcuts to the path. You get, if the shortcut was the way, it would just be called the way. So when you get pushed back on the path that everyone has to go down when you get to these larger sizes and you're kind of more traditional. My experience is that's when you see a lot of companies have to either get consultants or lobbyists on K Street, or they stand up their own government relations branch, or they have someone full time that's just focused on engaging with the one customer, because your make it or break it depends on your ability to kind of navigate all of these uncharted waters that everyone kind of dies in this valley of death, to get us, get a supporter on the Hill, get a sponsor in the Pentagon, figure out the traps to run to make the people who are writing the requirements, the people who are authorizing the money, to all on the same page, all on the same timeline that works for your company. And that's like, it's like a magic trick at some point. There's just the complexity to pull it off. It's amazing that more companies don't go out of business, and the number of companies that walk away from defense is pretty staggering.
That is literally what I do every day. Like we have a called the Christmas tree. It's like a map of all of the DoD and all of the stakeholders that have to be supportive of what we're doing in order for it to happen. And like our job is to turn all those boxes green, and then we can go. And I think companies underestimate, like when you're not fully bought into working with the government, you might like dabble, and dabbling is dangerous because like you won't get there, and you won't know that you're not getting there either. So like pretty much everything that you just mentioned, from consultants to outside lobbying firms to internal government relations, to growth focused folks who are walking the halls of the Pentagon every single day, we've built exactly that. And we started building that very early because we knew how critical it was going to be. And I don't know, maybe it was a little weird the first time I like wrote a check to a lobbyist, as like it was just, I don't know, I had never thought of it before, but like it's such a kind of integral part of how the system works. It's not like a dirty thing, it's just how the system works. And like if you're not fully bought into this being critical for your company, it's kind of hard to get over the hump and invest in those ways. But yeah, for us, we've been doing it for a long time now.
So in your story there, you talked about how you had like a Christmas tree, right? And you got to turn the boxes from red to green. Do you have any massive horror stories, or what would be the one thing that stands out in your mind about the biggest red box that you ever had? And like,
oh, I definitely can't talk about that publicly. I'll get too spicy.
Well, maybe no names or anything, right? Like,
there's always knives in the dark.
Well, it's 2023 right now at the beginning. So in your Christmas tree, I mean, is it more like red or green, or kind of like a mix right now?
It has multiple colors. We went for the like multicolor lights instead of just the white lights.
Oh, okay.
Those are always the best.
Yeah. I'm actually a white light person for the Christmas tree, but I'll let this one go. Yeah, I mean, things are turning green. Things flip back and forth. You have to kind of continue to maintain currency and understanding, and it's not just like you talk to someone once and they say, yeah, this is cool, and like they're going to be supportive when something comes across their desk. It's a constant battle rhythm of building authentic relationships, frankly, and getting people to understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, why it's different from the way things have been done before, and all of that. All of that engagement with the government is fully underpinned by the technical progress that the company is making and how it's doing it from a schedule and a capital efficiency. We don't have that core, like that is the foundation that what we're doing is built on. If we don't execute there, it doesn't matter how well we can sell on the Hill, because we won't be able to get there at the end of the day. So yeah, there's a lot of boxes that are still gray, like unchecked, haven't gotten to, but like you kind of don't want to hit everybody. You have to be really strategic about who you engage at what stage. I mean, the DoD is an incredibly hierarchical system. Like that's the way militaries are set up and designed, and that's how they function. It's easy to get over your skis if you don't know what you're doing. One wrong word to the right person at the wrong time can be deadly, which is like crazy to think about. So you really, really have to dig deep and understand not just what the org chart looks like, but who sits in which seats, where have they been, how do they think about things, what risks did they see, and then like who's coming next in 2 to 4 years when that person moves on. It's not just an individual person. So yeah, it's a massive, massive amount of complexity to deal with.
It's a little bit like high school, right? I mean, a lot happens on sort of gossip and innuendo behind the scenes, and there's definitely cliques.
AJ, I'm so glad you mentioned the fact that you call it a Christmas tree, like it's living, right? Like just because you turn something from red to green or whatever multicolored light you have, doesn't mean it can't turn back to red in 6 months. And offices don't make decisions, people do, and people have personalities.
Right.
And I have seen things go from like swinging one direction to the other just because someone moved that summer and a new person came in. They go, man, I don't like that.
Yep.
Like, well.
And that's why speed is so important, right? The faster you move, the less of that change you have to deal with, and that's why it's so critical.
There's so many nuggets here.
The Christmas tree is a reference to like the little board that's on submarines. It's like, can you dive or can you not dive? And everything has to be green.
There you go.
And it's red. So,
and hopefully this is golden, man. This is like there's so much key information here for like any business that wants to sell to the DoD. Like this is a can't miss.
It's tough, but it's worth it. And that's where I think, go back to, there's a purpose, the cause and purpose, and what you're trying to do. The juice is worth the squeeze. It'd be really nice if, the government made it easier to help them, which collectively is helping us, right? It's national security. It benefits all of us. So that's kind of been our kick lately from, Jake, Tim, and I talking of like, there's so many problems. And if you can just pick one, just pick one at a time and fix it instead of, here you kind of chew around the edges and don't really actually do anything or reshuffle the deck chairs. Here's a new policy with new office symbol. And then, 6 months later, the people switch out again and the learning curve starts over. And then on the opposite side, you have people who never leave. And so you have the frozen middle and you're like, they're just going to, outweight the people who rotate in the office. The cultural, organizational, dysfunctional dynamics of how it all works is crazy. But that's the cost of having a free society. So
that is the game. Yeah, I'd like to refer to this part of what we do as just like you have to learn to like the taste of glass. Like it's going to be very painful and probably not healthy for you, but you get through it and you get to the other side.
VCs always talk about moats, right? Like this is a moat. Right? When you build that expertise inside your company to actually sell to the government, it's not easily replicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a reason why the closest buildings to the front door of the Pentagon are very large buildings with very large signs of all the very large defense companies. There's a reason for that.
We did try out a billboard here in Atlanta for a little while. It's like $1,000 for a billboard for 2 months. Let's give it a try. So maybe we'll do that in
nice.
Pentagon City.
So a quick question for you. I don't know if you had been following or it's probably been a little while now, but General Milley was like, whenever China did the hypersonics test and there's like, it's a Sputnik moment. Did that actually, did that help you or did it hurt you or in terms of like programmatics and availability of resources?
I think inside the department, it didn't really change much. And that's mostly because like people have been paying a little bit more attention to what's going on behind the scenes. So it didn't feel like there was some like big shift. I think it absolutely raised the kind of specter of hypersonic technology publicly. Like that one Financial Times article did so much to get people thinking about it and talking about it publicly, which is important. So in that regard, there was definitely a bit of a change there.
It was pretty crazy. I wasn't sure if there's going to be like, it opens up the floodgates, right? And then you have all these other kind of competitors or makes it more difficult to compete across the spectrum. But sounds like you guys are pretty much set up, which is, super impressive.
Yeah, we have one competitor, and it is China.
That's a pretty good pitch.
Yeah, and the reason I say that, like you might think I'd say like Lockheed or Boeing or Northrop or whoever on the prime side, but like I actually think there's a strong case for a collaborative and symbiotic relationship there amongst the primes. Like we're not coming in here to knock them out of the way. Like we're building a thing that's kind of a bit of a niche that's a little bit different from I think some of the strategic paths that they would take as companies, even in the hypersonic aircraft world, because of the we're working in an area where we can deliver things at a price point that just isn't possible for, big, large aerospace companies. That opens up, I'll say, combat mass for hypersonic, for like reusable hypersonic systems, which is a little bit different than I think any other hypersonic aircraft that's going to come. Those things are going to be national assets, $500 million, $1 billion. And you're going to employ those very, very differently than you would something that's significantly, like an order of magnitude less expensive.
AJ, are you aware of the Project Mayhem from AFRL?
Okay.
So
yep.
I saw that announcement and I'm like, oh, here we go again. So for those who aren't tracking, I think it was a $350-ish million contract awarded to Leidos, which is kind of like a really big, company. And then they subbed it out to Kratos, is the kind of the aircraft design person on the team. They basically are going to design, so kind of a PowerPoint, a little bit, probably more than a PowerPoint for that much money, but basically a PowerPoint of a hypersonic vehicle. And this is and I don't know about you, but I love this because it's like, well, who's going to win? Is it going to be the commercial funded like startup that is doing this, or is it the 35-year-old process of here's AFRL is going to fund some research and contract some companies to study the problem and write a paper and do some modeling in sim.
I love a race.
Yeah,
you're in the right business for that.
You're in the right. Here's the funds. Or keep going.
I warned you.
So, I mean, is that? Are you kind of read that right? Like, that's a side project. That's not even. I wouldn't even put it in the same ballpark as a competitor.
I don't think so. I think if you kind of dig into a little bit more about the program, it has some fundamental differences that put it in a little bit of a different class.
If you want, let's talk about before we wrap up. I'll give you a chance to talk about really the commercial side. We've been talking about defense. Well, this is a defense podcast, so we should. But I do want to give you the opportunity to talk about Halcyon and kind of where that commercial, what is the itch that's going to scratch on the commercial side, and what is it?
Yeah, so Halcyon is a Mach 5 aircraft, carries about 20 passengers over about 4,000 nautical miles, so across the Atlantic Ocean, without stopping in about 90 minutes, and about 3 hours, a little less than 3 hours across the Pacific with a stop. So what it does is basically make the entire world regional. So, as close as Atlanta and New York City or DC are today, the East Coast of the United States and West Coast of Europe will be just as close. Going transcontinental in the United States, actually a little bit less time than that to go across the Pacific Ocean between the West Coast and Japan, Korea, and so forth. Not to mention all the north-south stuff and, what does it do to Australia? It introduces it to the world. In one regard. So yeah, I mean, if you look back historically, when transportation networks have accelerated, it's been associated with like significant, like multi-single-digit point of GDP growth in the affected regions. And if you can do that at a global scale, speed up the world by 5x, that unlocks a massive amount of new economic growth that is just sitting there waiting to be excavated. So not to mention the kind of positive social impacts of people just spending more time face to face, which is clearly important. I used to before COVID, when we would be pitching the company to investors, we'd be like, in their office and say something like, well, you wouldn't make an investment over Zoom, would you? Face to face is still important. And then I think in our Series A and our Series B, we had very few, like almost no in-person meeting, which is crazy. So yeah, we stopped saying that.
But it's good though, because you have to go through that to then realize, like right now, here you are on the other side of that, because you didn't realize what you had till you lost it. The value of having that interpersonal relationship in person, the human dynamics is different, and people I don't think appreciated that until they lost it for enough time to go, I just really missed something. I don't know what it is. And then you get back together, you're like, there it is.
I mean, just think about it. If you're competing against another organization for a contract, in the commercial world, purely relationship based, you think the company that sells over Zoom versus the company that goes in person is going to have a better shot? Yeah. The less time you can spend on an airplane and more time on the ground where we all live, the better.
In person wins.
Okay.
So what do you think the passenger experience will be like? Like how many G's, right, are you putting passengers under? And what's the
it'll be limited. It'll be limited to pretty close to what you have today. So I think it's like 0.3 or so, like back in your seat. So if you've watched the Chimera mode transition video, we do have a little bit of work to do there because the engine shuts off for a couple seconds and then turns back on. So that's a bit of a jolt when you're flying at Mach 3, but we'll get there. But no, I mean the passenger experience when you're up and cruising on a ramjet, I think it's going to be better. So number one, there's no rotating parts or moving parts in the ramjet, just valves. So like there's really no inherent kind of internal vibration loads that are being driven into the aircraft. There's some aerodynamics things that may drive some, but for the most part, it's like a fundamentally smoother ride. And then of course, like we probably have to put one window in there because it's going to be one hell of a view. But really, like the whole experience of flying on Halcyon is about not being on an airplane.
Yeah, I was gonna say the conceptual design had no windows on the, including
right.
the front. There's no windows on the front either. Well, it's a picture right now, but
Maybe everyone gets an F-35 helmet, right? And you can just look around in 360.
Oh, there you go.
I actually really love augmented reality for that specific use case. Like people have talked about like LCD screens and whatnot on the walls. No, that's not the way.
nice.
All right, before we cut this out, I think we have to talk about the tweet, right? Where you want to turn
Oh yeah.
you want to turn defense
This is
contractors into insurance
not a tweet.
companies. So repeat it if you can, and then I'd love to hear your thought process there.
All right, I'm gonna look it up because I don't want to get it wrong. But as I'm doing this, I'll just give you some thoughts from my brain. Like one of the problems with companies working with the DoD is kind of how the DoD prices things and sets cost and price justification. There's like margin profit is bad when working with the Department of Defense and the government in general. And that is part of why it's so hard to raise venture investment. Because like in order for a venture capitalist to be interested, like 5 to 10% margin isn't going to do it. You have to get to a ridiculous amount of scale. There's a lot of just issues with kind of like, when a contract is evaluated by a contracting officer, they have to write typically, within the Federal Acquisition Regulation, a cost justification. Everything is cost based. So no matter like there is no like concept of value that is delivered. But it's like value is the difference between price and cost. Like there is no concept of that. It is only cost, and then tacking on some small single digit percentage of profit. So that makes it really hard. And there are some ways around that with commercial items where you can get a pricing justification for that. So where the government is looking at the price of an item versus the cost of it. So yeah, all right. Here's what I said. I said hot take. So I prefaced it like I know this is going to be spicy, and I haven't fully thought this through, but here we go. Companies supporting national security should be offered market profits for their products and services during peacetime, and no profits during conflicts. Incentivize deterrence and conflicts. So my logic here was like, okay, if I'm allowed to make 10% all the time, that's one thing. So what if I could make whatever I wanted, say 40% most of the time, and then I was incentivized to reduce the amount of time I spend making 0, because like 5 and 10 are much closer to 0 than they are to 40. So like, how different is it? Not that much. And okay, now I'm incentivized to drive technology that will deter conflict versus technology that may extend conflict or things like that. So that's kind of the logic behind it. Clearly, there are a lot of other things that stand in the way of that actually being a useful thing to do. But that's the problem that
I love it as a thought experiment, though. I mean, Lockheed goes from having a bunch of lobbyists to having a bunch of lobbyists and hired diplomats, I guess, around the world, right, keeping us at peace.
Yeah. World peace is good.
Exactly. Like, isn't that good?
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I mean, like you dig in, and Palmer Luckey wrote back and said, the issue there is like you'd be highly incentivized to maintain the state of conflict on the government side because everything's technically cheaper. Although, like, what's to say the costs aren't higher during wartime? But actually, I think the real issue is if like within the Air Force you're looking at procurement and you're like, okay, how should I size my fleet? If I size my fleet ahead of a conflict when margins are high and I'm expecting airplanes to cost much less, then I'll just wait till the conflict starts and I'll buy them then. And that's not a very good deterrent at all. So, yeah, definitely some problems.
Yeah. Then we need like Lockheed to basically have a private standing army, right? Then it's like an insurance company. They build their own deterrent fleet. They're charging like a service fee to the DoD every month for peacetime.
Deterrence as a service.
Deterrence as a service.
Yep.
I'm gonna go ahead and trademark that now.
Hey, that'll drive investment if the margins are good. Yeah, and I think like how you apply it is important. It's like the zero profit thing. If that only applied to like replacing stockpiles of things that are actually used in conflict, so long as you're properly incentivized to actually create those stockpiles outside of conflict in the first place, how does it apply to RDT&E or O&M or other procurement things? I think there's some ways that it could make sense. Anyway, I promise I am a captain.
Well, we're about out of time. I do want to, AJ, I do want to give you the final word. So we kind of went all over the place, which is kind of what we do on this pod. But what is like the one nugget that you would like to leave the listeners with about either Hermeus, yourself, your mission? The one thing. What's the one thing?
Yeah, just that fast airplanes are coming, so be ready.
No pun? No.
Okay.
Ain't first or last.
I'm not actually good at making puns myself. I just observe them and point them out.
Okay. Well, AJ, thanks for joining us on the show. I had a great time. I think the listeners are going to have a good time
AJ.
too.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And speaking of the listeners, if somehow you have made it this far, if you just go the extra distance, give us a 5-star rating on iTunes and Spotify and spread the word. We'd really appreciate it. Keeps us going and growing.
Do it.
That's it. We're out. See ya.